Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before we rank each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 1, Episode 17, that 70s episode. Episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of exactly what happens within this episode. So at the start of the episode, Prue and Phoebe are looking at photos of their childhood, and Phoebe notes how few of them include her because most of the photos were taken before their mother died and before their father left, and she was barely born at that point. We then have Piper coming in talking about how there's a man who visits every year on the same day with flowers for their grandmother, Penny, who had passed since he had visited last year, and they're wondering what they should do about it. And then, of course, the doorbell rings, or he knocks on the door, one of the two, I can't remember now. And he, of course, looks old at first, is bringing the flowers. Piper, unsure how to tell him, freezes him to buy time, and this is when the clock is chiming. So when he unfreezes, he makes a note that he only heard 5 chimes instead of the appropriate number of chimes, and that means that they've got their powers, and he ominously enters the house. He de-ages himself and tells them that he had only allowed himself to age so that they wouldn't be suspicious of him, and reveals that their mother, Patty, had blessed his ring and gave him immunity to their powers, which do not work on him now that he has the ring on. When he was in his old form, he wasn't wearing the ring, hence why he was able to be frozen at the start. Of course, the girls run to the book. When they get to the book, there's a spell to unbind a pack or unbind a bond, and they say this spell, which ends up transporting them to the past, to the day that their mother blessed the ring. And this is when they get to see their Grams who had passed recently, their mother who they lost when they were very young, their younger selves, which still have their powers. And they work towards trying to. So Patty gets a premonition from Phoebe, who she is pregnant with, but doesn't know she's pregnant with yet, about 3 warlocks trying to kidnap Child Prue and Child Piper. However, this is not warlocks, these are their future selves. And then, before they can explain to Grams who they are from the future, Grams sees them with the children, sends them flying out of the house. They then go to their mother's workplace to try to speak to her. They realize that they don't have their powers in the past, and so their plan to prove who they are to their mother obviously falls flat. So Piper blurts out that they know that she's pregnant because she assumed that close family would know that. However, Patty not only doesn't know that she's pregnant yet, but also doesn't believe that she can get pregnant anymore, that it's medically impossible, and so basically leaves awkwardly. Then she gets the call from Grams about, the 3 warlocks arriving and getting kicked out. So she leaves. She runs into Phoebe in the street as well as Nicholas. Phoebe then attacks Nicholas, goes to warn her sisters that he's there, and then they quickly leave the diner and they go, and because they don't have their own powers but their younger selves have powers, they take their younger selves to a park to try to train them to defeat Nicholas because that's who has their powers currently. They get arrested for child kidnapping, which is as you would expect, and are sent to jail. This is when Nicholas lures Patty by pretending to be Victor to his hotel room, where he then reveals that she is the mother of the Charmed ones and that she does have a baby in her stomach right now, and that he was going to kill her originally, but now that he knows about the Charmed ones, he's going to wait, and he then forces her to basically bless the ring, giving immunity to the Charmed One's powers. And then Patty goes directly to the jail where the sisters are currently locked up. And that is where they reveal themselves as her daughters, and knowing that they knew that she was pregnant and the fact that they do look like themselves grown up, she then takes them back to the manor. Grams is a little suspicious, but ultimately, also when they can answer all of her test questions, believes them. and talks about their plan, how they're going to bind their powers, which is the explanation for why they didn't have them, until the pact is removed. And then the sisters basically talk about how that was what they had done and they had just got their powers. And Penny was confused about why she would unbind their powers before she had dealt with the pact. Of course, this is when she finds out about her own death, which is a bit of a emotional moment. But she stays on track on business, and they work together to steal back the ring from Nicholas's hotel room so that Patty can unbless it, while Penny writes a spell to send them back to their own time. However, at first the spell doesn't really work because they don't have enough power behind it, but the power of three, which is the two children and the unborn Phoebe, are able to power the spell to send them back to their own time in an emotional farewell to the family members that they had lost. And once they return to their time, they find that in the book, Grams had written a spell and left a spell little potion packet so that they could immediately cast the spell upon their return. And they are able then to kill Nick, who now is no longer immune to their powers. So Prue is able to send him flying into an armoire or a cupboard, and Piper then freezes him. They cast the spell. Nicholas dies and is vanquished. And then when they return to looking through pictures to close out the episode, Phoebe sees one of herself, or rather of her mom and the two children when they were casting the spell, and comments how it's the best picture of herself she's ever taken, as she was in her mother's womb at the time. And it's a nice little wrap up to the episode. After I've rewatched the episode, I rank the episode on two separate lists, a mostly objective list and then the personal ranking. One is based on set values and then the other on my opinion. So with this episode, there were a lot of things from our mostly objective rank values that applied, and I've highlighted the ones I felt applied in this episode. The first small thing that applied was that obviously there is a single episode supporting character introduction with Nicholas, who is our main villain. We then get multi-season supporting characters introduction, which is Patty, the girl's mother, and Penny, who is their Grams, and both of these characters relatively consistently reoccur throughout all of the seasons of the series, and obviously, even when they're not on screen, have a great impact on them as the people who raised them and gave birth to them. And so they are worth 3 points each. I also do like the fact that with Patty, when she is introduced, they do a very slow-mo entrance where she's at the restaurant Buddies where she works as a waitress, and when she comes out of the back as Piper and Prue are sitting in their booth, they do this whole like slow-mo shot to really try to show how emotional it is that they are seeing their mother for the first time since she had passed in the flesh. And I felt that that was very impactful. They didn't do that for Grams, but then Grams is the one who raised them, so they have fresh memories of their Grams, whereas the mother is more impactful because of the fact she died when they were so young. We then, of course, get some impactful, memorable lines, and Grams always has the best lines in the show. These are worth 3 points, but there were two in this one that I found were really good. The first one, of course, is that if husbands were supposed to stay married, God would have made them live longer. And I feel, one, that's an excellent concept, like an excellent thing to say. But on the other hand, I also feel like it foreshadows because we learn later on in the series that Grams's first husband is the one that she truly loved the most, and he had died young, and basically none of her marriages after that first had lasted. So it kind of foreshadows that knowledge that we will learn later, which I will point out again probably when we learn it, which makes it very memorable. And then the other one was also kind of more of like an amusing line, But basically, when she finds out that Prue, Piper, and Phoebe are the charmed ones, she's sitting there all happy and she's like, I always knew I would deliver the charmed ones. She glances over at Patty. Patty's giving her a look. And then she kind of just like brushes it off. Once removed, of course. I thought that was a great moment. That was a great scene. And it's very memorable. As soon as the episode started playing, I remembered the line from it because I knew that she was going to say that, and it was always something that amused me from childhood to present. The next positive, of course, is that we get some multi-season main character development with Phoebe, which is worth 4 points. Phoebe did not know her mother. She died when she was very young, before she could really imprint any of the memories of her mother into her mind. And because of this fact, she had always wanted to know their mother. And she, at the end of the episode, points out that every time that she had ever made a wish as a child, she wished for time with her mother. And so when she finally gets that time, it was very difficult for her to then let it go and return to their own time. We see this struggle when they are first being sent back to their own time. She writes down a note to warn her mother not to go near water on the day that she died and puts it in the Book of Shadows. However, there's a couple of false starts with the spell where it doesn't have enough power, so they don't actually go anywhere. And before the spell actually works, she ends up coming to the realization and the acceptance that not everybody can be saved or should be saved, that sometimes destiny has to work itself out. And so she makes the difficult choice to remove the note from the Book of Shadows so as not to change the past from what it was meant to be. And that acceptance, of course, is what is showing the growth of the character throughout the episode. And then lastly, on the positive side, we have the world building aspect, and that is in a previous episode, we had the warlock coming from the future in The Truth Is Out There and It Hurts. So we already are aware of the fact that time travel is possible and is a concept within the series. However, this is the first time that the charmed ones themselves, so Prue, Piper, and Phoebe, actually time travel within the series themselves. And specifically time travel to the past where they had already existed. This also is where they learn that obviously only one set of them can have their powers at a time, which is why their younger selves have the powers, and they as adults do not have powers when they go back in time in this case. And then we also learn that they had their powers as a child and that the powers were bound, which is why they just got them at the start of the series when Grams had passed on. And we also learn that they were childhood friends with Andy, who they did actively use their powers on, which Prue even comments maybe that's why he's so suspicious of them now, is he was victim of their powers as a child. Although Grams, when he unfreezes, does erase his memory, but it could still be like a subconscious thing which is causing him to be suspicious, especially since at the end of the last episode we saw he was making a file. So that kind of all is tying that together. And then we also learn from Grams that eventually they will be able to write their own spells. At this point, they haven't tried to write any spells, and in fact, based on the reaction to Grams saying she's going to create a spell to send them back to the future, the sisters are shocked as they were not aware of the fact that they were able to create the spells themselves. Obviously, they haven't created any spells themselves yet, but this is the foreshadowing that it is in fact possible. So with those world building points, that brings us all the way up to 18 out of 10 so far, which does make this a 10 out of 10 episode, as the only negative is a -4 points, which still brings us above 10. However, there is one negative, and that is that there is a continuity error. In Thank You for Not Morphing, we get Victor introduced, who is their father. And it is implied that the father, well, it's not implied, it's specifically stated that the father left when Phoebe was 1 year old. There is a Christmas movie that they watch at the end of that episode, Thank You for Not Morphing, in which they are having a Christmas where Phoebe, as a 1-year-old, is there, where Prue is there, and where Piper is there. And yet, in this episode, Victor has already left and Patty is barely pregnant, implying then that he left before Phoebe was even born, which is very different from the narrative that we got in Thank You for Not Morphing. This is within the same season. Obviously, they should have been keeping track of where the sisters' ages were and where they had people leaving and coming and such, but obviously that's pretty big oversight, as it does change the meaning behind like the episodes. Like on the one hand, it's who was lying, because like Victor obviously had video proof that he was there, but now they're back in the time. We don't know, did they get back together very briefly after he found out about Phoebe and then he left again? We don't really know what happened here, but obviously at this point it's an error, and so worth noting. But again, 10 out of 10. And so now we come to our reminder of our season 1 rankings so far on our mostly objective ranking list. And in first place, we have Something Wicked This Way Comes. I've Got You Under My Skin, From Fear to Eternity, Is There a Woogie in the House? This episode, that 70s episode, falls into 5th place. It's in 5th place because on our mostly objective ranking, when more than one episode has the same ranking, it just gets listed in episode order. We then have Wicked Envy, Secrets and Guys, Dead Man Dating, Feats of Clay, Dream Sorcerer, The Witch is Back, Thank You for Not Morphing, Which Proves It Anyway, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, The Wendigo, The Wedding from Hell, and then last but not least, The Fourth Sister. So now we come to the personal ranking, and the personal ranking is also very high. I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 because I didn't think that it was perfect, and it obviously had some flaws, such as the continuity error. I feel like this episode was less about defeating the bad guy and more about the sisters kind of getting some closure with regards to their mother and their Grams' deaths so that they can move forward more easily and more with that closure into the future. It really was also kind of to introduce us to Patty and Grams, who are going to recur throughout the series in several different episodes, throughout several different seasons. And so I felt like Nicholas didn't really get fleshed out. The good news is that he didn't really need to be because of what their purpose was. His main threat level was because of the ring, which is what they went back in time to correct, and then they do correct it. He gets vanquished. He didn't really need to be fleshed out. But I feel like this episode was more on the emotional side. I also found it a little bit amusing when all of the sisters were meeting their mother. At this point, she doesn't know who they are. And they're all there, like, dumbfoundedly staring at her in awe, like she is, like, the most important person in the world, which to them they are. But from her perspective, when I imagine what she must have been thinking, like, these random people I don't know are sitting here, like, staring at me and all, like, what is going on? Who are they? Why are they looking at me like this? I think it would be really awkward, and I found it kind of funny to, like, just imagine what it would be like from her perspective. I also liked how they kind of had their false starts on the spell to send them back to the future. They try it the first time with Patty alone. It doesn't work. So then Patty and Penny, or sorry, no. The first time it was Penny alone, Grams alone, who tried to cast the spell, but it didn't work. They then try with both Patty and Penny, and they think it might have worked. They have like this really like especially the actress who played Penny, she gets the emotion into her voice of like saying goodbye to her granddaughters, and she's like on the verge of crying while she's saying the spell. And then it looks like they went away and they're kind of like having this comforting each other moment while their girls are gone, and then like 10 seconds later they're back and they realize that though the spell is fine, they need more power behind it, but the power of three doesn't exist yet until Patty says that actually it does because Phoebe was able to send her a premonition. She obviously already has her powers within the womb. Therefore, they're able to cast a spell with Piper and Prue's child selves, and then Patty herself, who is carrying Phoebe and therefore makes up that third in the power of three. And they are then able to send back to the present. But I did find the like little false starts on the spell a little bit funny. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out is that I really, really appreciated the casting. And what I mean by that is with the casting, the actors look like, or the actresses look like they are family. You know, they have enough common features that it really looks like they could be related biologically to each other. And especially with the young Piper and the young Prue, they specifically chose children who looked similar enough to the adult actresses that you could believe that they would grow up to look like the adult actresses. This is a minor, little bit off topic, but as an example of wrong casting, on this channel I also watch and rank Merlin, the BBC Merlin TV show. And Mordred in that series, they cast a child Mordred when he first appears, and then later on they bring in an adult Mordred. They obviously couldn't use the original actor because he wouldn't have grown to the age they needed him to by the time they were casting for the later season when he was an adult, as more time was supposed to have passed between the seasons than actually did in reality. Fair. But the thing is, the child Mordred had very distinct features, and then when they cast the adult Mordred, despite knowing who they had cast as a child and who looked like a child, they cast an actor that looked absolutely nothing at all like the child actor. And it's complete suspension of disbelief, gone out the window, because you cannot believe that that child would grow up to look like that guy. Absolutely no way. They don't look related at all. The only thing they have in common is their hair color and skin color. Their eye color is different, their nose shapes are different, their bone structures are different, their body types are different, their face shapes are different. Every single other aspect of this person is completely different from that child actor. And it just looks terrible. So I genuinely and fully appreciate the fact that the casting people who did this show took the time and took the consideration to cast child actors that looked like they could grow into the adult version of themselves, because it just helps with like the cohesion of the episode and the series, and it helps with that suspension of disbelief because it looks like those children could have grown into those adults. You can believe that these are the child versions and that those are the adult versions of the same people. And I appreciate that so much. So much. And even like with Patty and Penny, you can believe that they would have given birth to, the three actresses who play Piper, Phoebe, and Prue because they share features in common. And again, I appreciate that they look like they could be a cohesive family that is related. That like all of their differences are within what you would expect for the diversity within a family, but none of them look like they would be completely unrelated. Like they didn't choose people who had like beach blonde hair to be the parent of brunettes. Like they actually cast properly. And I appreciate that. I appreciate it very much. Having said all that, and going a little on a tangent there because it does bother me when casting is done poorly, I have to say that this episode overall was very likable, especially because for me, the main draw of the series is that family connection, that it follows a singular family throughout their traumas and their lives, and it's just kind of like added bonus we've got powers, we've got evil and crime fighting and such. But for me, the magic, the heart of the series is that family connection, and this episode really heavily focused on that, which again, I really enjoyed and I really liked that that happened or that that was done. Anyways, because I appreciated that, because this is an episode that's more up my alley with it being very focused on the family and the emotional connection to it, and less about the magic, though the magic is still an element there, I decided to rank it 9 out of 10, which then brings our personal season 1 rankings so far to, in first place, Is There a Woogie in the House? Dead Man Dating, The Witch is Back, From Fear to Eternity. This episode I felt land was good for 5th place, which was That 70s Episode. Then we have Wicca Envy, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, Something Wicca This Way Comes, Dream Sorcerer, Feats of Clay, Thank You for Not Morphing, Which Proves It Anyway, Secrets and Guys, I've Got You Under My Skin, The Wendigo, The Wedding from Hell, and then as always, in our last place, The Fourth Sister. And that brings us to our final segment, which is our series ranking overall, which is where we're ranking each of the seasons against each other. And with the scores from this episode, we have an additional 10 on the mostly objective ranking, which brings us up to 117 out of 220. And then on the personal ranking, we have added 9, which has brought us up to 113 out of 220. And now with that, we have rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 1, Episode 17, That 70s Episode. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.